Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're decoding the invisible digital architecture of our modern world. And I want to kick things off with a pretty big question. Are you actually free, or do you just kind of feel free? It sounds like a philosophical trap, right? But as we're going to see, it's literally the defining question of our era.
Okay, let's dive right in with a cultural touchstone we all know, The Matrix. Our sources point out that this movie acts like a modern Rorschach test for how we perceive reality and hidden domination. It perfectly updates Plato's ancient allegory of the cave. You know the one, where prisoners mistake projected shadows on a wall for absolute reality. But what happens when those chains aren't made of iron anymore, but of data?
So here's our map for today's explainer. We'll start with the illusion of freedom, move on to enter the infocracy, then look at humans as data emitters. After that, we'll tackle the crisis of truth, and finally, democracy as marketing. All right, let's begin with Section 1, the illusion of freedom, from Plato's cave to the desert of the real. We're talking about the transition from the heavy physical shackles of the past to the totally invisible, weightless chains we wear today. As the philosopher Byung-Chul Han notes in our sources, the history of human domination is basically the history of mastering screens. This goes all the way back to antiquity. I mean, the shadows flickering on the archaic screen of Plato's cave illustrated the domain of myths. It was a way to control what people believed to be true. But man, screens have evolved so much since then. Which brings us to a massive, revolutionary shift in how society is managed. This is Section 2. Enter the infocracy, the new digital regime. In his work on infocracy, Han argues that we've completely transitioned away from the old systems, exploiting physical bodies and raw human energy. Instead, we've entered an era where information and data are the supreme forces of power. The means of production aren't factories anymore. The new means of production is literally just information itself. Look at the stark contrast here between the past and the present. The old disciplinary regime, think of strict prisons, rigid factories, spatial isolation, demanded obedience, that's largely obsolete. It's been replaced by the information regime. Now you aren't forced into isolation. You're enthusiastically encouraged to join open networks. You aren't demanded to obey. You're prompted to communicate, to express yourself. The crazy thing is, the subject actually believes they're completely free and acting authentically. So here's the crucial definition of this information regime, or the infocracy. It's a system of domination where algorithms and artificial intelligence quietly, secretly rule the social and political landscape. It relies entirely on surveillance capitalism, but it works so well precisely because it doesn't feel like surveillance at all. We can actually visualize this modern paradox through architecture. Historically, power was hidden, right? Like the Kaaba, with its black mantle representing the arcane and untouchable. But today, we have structures like the Apple Glass Cube. It looks entirely transparent, giving off this vibe of limitless freedom and open communication. But there's a serious dark side to this transparency. It's only on the front end. The back end, the algorithmic machine room actually processing all your data, remains a completely hidden, pitch-black box. Basically, we are transparent to them, but their power is completely opaque to us. And that builds directly into Section 3, Humans as Data Emitters, the Rise of Data Politic. This fundamentally changes what it even means to be a human being, let alone a citizen. Under this new reality of data politic, political and corporate systems no longer look at us as a unified people, a collective demos, or even as complex individuals. We are treated as merely informational beings, just constant data emitters. Our daily activities really only have value to the system based on how easily they can be quantified and tracked. Honestly, perhaps the most sobering takeaway from all these sources is how this surveillance capitalism degrades us. When literally everything we do is mined for predictive behavioral data, we're reduced to what the texts explicitly call consumer cattle. We aren't being herded by physical fences anymore, we're herded by algorithmically curated feeds. Let's just compare our reality to classic dystopian fiction for a second. In George Orwell's 1984, the telescreens were terrifying, untouchable, and constantly inspired fear, which inherently invites rebellion. But our modern touchscreens, they work completely differently. They're consumable. They're friendly. They create this amazing illusion of freedom of the fingertips. In this regime, being free doesn't mean taking meaningful action in the real world. It just means clicking, liking, swiping.
And as Han points out, this kind of superficial digital consumption is mutually exclusive with actual revolution. But you gotta wonder, how did we get so easily managed by data? Why aren't we pushing back? Well, that brings us to Section 4, the crisis of truth, when reality shatters. Our academic sources dive deep into how Western society is fundamentally struggling to even define what truth is anymore. As our culture becomes highly individualistic, skeptical, and frankly, what the texts describe as narcissistic and vindictive, the very foundation of our shared knowledge just starts to crumble. Philosophers have actually had to classify truth into several competing camps. You've got the correspondence theory, which argues truth has to match physical reality and cold, hard facts. Then there's coherence, where truth is just about beliefs making logical sense within a closed system. And pragmatic, where truth is defined simply by what's useful or performs well. The huge takeaway here is that truth isn't a simple, universally agreed upon anchor anymore. It's totally fractured. And as those cohesive theories of truth break down, society loses its shared ethical resources. The texts offer this really striking metaphor. When you're on a ship in the middle of a massive storm and everyone is just shouting, "Me first," well, navigation becomes pretty complicated. This storm of diverse, conflicting truths makes genuine participatory democracy nearly impossible. Which directly fuels our final segment, Section 5, Democracy as Marketing, the Information War. In the infocracy, election campaigns aren't earnest debates about ideals or policies anymore. They are outright information wars. The weapons of choice? Automated bots generating fake volume, troll armies amplifying outrage, and fake news completely displacing verified facts. Behind the scenes, digital psychopolitics and psychometrics are actively mapping out our individual desires. They predict and manipulate voter behavior to bypass our conscious, rational decision-making altogether. Ultimately, as one of our sources powerfully notes, democracy degrades into just a gigantic marketing exercise. The public sphere gets completely hollowed out. Voters are nudged into choosing leaders not based on objective truths or moral arguments, but entirely on carefully manufactured, algorithmically targeted images. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over the next time you pick up your phone. Are your daily interactions, your clicks, your likes, even your outrage, are they true acts of freedom? Or are they just predictable data points keeping you securely locked inside the infocracy?